let's roll.
Thank you very much for sitting down with us.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk first about the reopening and how it's going. Looking at the statistics, we moved into phase 3 on June 30th. And on that day, the 3-day average for new infections was about 30, it was 31. And 3 weeks later, it got up to 75. And it got as high as 123. It's now back down in the 70s, which is still double what we were seeing when we entered phase 3. Do you think the move into phase 3 caused this uptick? And if so, did we move too quickly?
That's a great question. So, how do I think about it? I mean, look, I think there's, in my view, you could ask the public health experts, it's clearly the case that moving into phase 3 and allowing more activity, you see more cases. So yes, no doubt about it. You know, you see it now, people are going out more. We went from a complete lockdown, because we track the mobility of people. People were not moving, really, in phase 2. And so yes, phase 3, people are going out and about more, and unsurprisingly, we see cases. Having said that, we're still in a good spot. So to answer your question, do I think it was a mistake to do that? No, I don't. Because, you know, look, at that time in phase 2, we had 142,000 people on unemployment insurance. We still have almost 100,000. So for me, it's been always a balance. But the thing I really look at, even more than the cases, is hospitalizations. And those two are up. But it's not, our system's not even close to being overwhelmed. You know, we're under 25% usage of our COVID beds. So, long story short, yes, there are more cases, but our hospital system is well equipped to handle the volume we have, and a lot more people are back to work, so it feels like about the right balance.
On the trade-off, the number of cases are the key measure for whether it's safe for folks to go back to school. If it turns out that the additional cases that were caused by opening up bars and restaurants make it so that in Providence or Cranston or some other communities, they can't safely reopen in-person school, was that trade-off worth it?
So you putting your finger on all the really tough calls that I've had to make. I don't think you can say that the increased cases is predominantly due to the fact that we've allowed indoor dining with bars. And I personally have spent countless hours grilling our own Department of Health and Data team, the folks at Johns Hopkins. Just the other day, I had a team of experts on the phone, public health experts from around the country, digging into our data, asking exactly that question. Like, if I were to just close bars, would things get a lot better? The answer is not a clear yes. And I know if I close bars, people are going to lose their jobs and restaurants are going to go out of business. They're hanging on by a thread as it is. So listen, I don't know if I have all the right answers. I'm just telling you how I'm thinking about it. The factors that go into the rising cases, bars and restaurants, no doubt about it. Testing lag time. For a while, the time between when someone got a test and when they got the result was on average more than 5 days, which means some people were waiting 7, 8, 9 days. That's a problem. That contributed to the spike, the increase. Because you can't do contact tracing and isolation effectively if it takes you a week and a half to find out if you're sick. Better contact tracing and case investigation. And then mask wearing. There was a dip, you can see it in the data. There was a clear dip in the mask wearing. And not surprisingly, you see it in the increased cases. So again, I ask them constantly, which one is it? Is it bars? Is it mask wearing? Is it social gatherings? Is it testing lag time? And they're like, it's a mix.
And testing, we had the Abbott tests, the rapid tests, had those going, and then those were phased out predominantly at around the same time where the labs nationally were overwhelmed, and that testing. Was that period really a problematic time when we didn't have the CVS sites and did, or
Again,
it already
it's,
started at that?
I think yes. It is hard to know exactly how much each one of these factors contributed to the problem, you know? I don't know, no one knows precisely. But you correctly say there were a whole bunch of things happening at once. There's the good and the bad of the Abbott product. The good was that they were rapid. We did over 1,000 a day. And in the period that we had that tent up at Twin River, we caught thousands of positives. So those are thousands of positives quickly identified, boom, into isolation. That helped us. On the flip side, they're not nearly as accurate. So I think, let me say this, we definitely did the right thing by moving away from that. I feel certain of that. The fact that we moved away from that and bulked up our higher quality PCR tests was definitely the right move. The perfect storm of shutting that down at the exact time commercial labs were getting overwhelmed, I'm sure contributed to the increase.
There was, earlier this summer, there was a lot of national attention in Politico. Bloomberg wrote about how we were, like, for example, leading the way on COVID. Now we're the only Rhode Island, or the only New England state on Massachusetts quarantine list. We're on and off New York, New Jersey, Connecticut. Do you think that narrative might have led to a false sense of security and maybe we declared victory too early?
That's an interesting question. I should ask you that question. I don't know. I don't know how much that contributes to human behavior.
Do you think we're still leading the way on COVID? I mean, obviously,
I do. I mean, you have to, the difference between us and Massachusetts and Connecticut is like a hair of difference. Also, some of the data is, I mean, it is true. If you look at Connecticut's data, in some ways they look better than us, but they're not testing nearly as many people. We've tested the equivalent of 43% of our population. They're at something like 25%. So if you test more people, you catch more cases. So, you know, that's why, again, I look at hospitalizations. And if you look at hospitalizations, because that's a fact, it's not dependent on how many people you test, whatever, we're doing just fine. And, you know, Massachusetts also has the highest unemployment rate in the country right now. I want to be clear, in no way am I criticizing the governor. I think he's doing a heck of a job, and this is an impossible environment in which to make decisions. It's just, it's a constant balance between keeping people safe and getting people back to work. And as long as our healthcare system is not overwhelmed, at the moment we have our nursing home problem under control. Test positive rate in nursing home now is 1%. That's a huge improvement over where we were even a month ago. So I feel that we're in a pretty stable place. The trick, of course, or not the trick, but we have to stay there. To stay there, I find it like on a human level, it's even hard for me to be so vigilant every single day for this long. And if you get your eye off the ball even a little, it's amazing how quickly this thing comes surging back.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of the question about whether if there's a lot of positive sounding news and optimism,
Yes.
that flips things around, and is that when mask wearing decreases, when the number of big parties increases?
Yeah, maybe.
And then with that in mind, you have a decision about going.
Can I just say something?
Okay.
Maybe, and again, I don't know. I would love to hear your views on that because you're in touch with a lot of people. I actually think people thought it went away. And no matter how many times I get up there and said, the virus is just as prevalent today as it used to be. We're just dealing with it better. Folks stopped believing that. You don't know how many people said to me, you did a good job getting us through the COVID crisis. Constantly hear that. I'm like, hello, we're still dealing with it. It is still a crisis. It's still here. So I don't, and I kept telling people, if you socialize, if you don't wear your mask, it's going to come back. I just think people figured it was gone.
There's they see things opening up. They see restaurants opening up, and even though they hear the message that it's still here, we're still at risk, they're subconsciously thinking otherwise when they see things open.
I'm sure that's true.
And if that's the case, even though we are down, we're in the 80s now, I think, in our 7-day
Yeah.
average, can we afford to go back to, or are you thinking of going to phase 4? Or do you think if we do, then we're back up over 100?
Yeah. I'm not inclined at this moment to go further a phase, to go to a phase 4. It's what I was saying to Brian. I think we're in a pretty stable spot right now, and stability is the name of the game. The only parts of our economy that aren't open are those that rely upon big gatherings, conventions, for example. And I don't think we're ready for that in the next month. And I'm doing this essentially a month at a time. Also, as you know, or I think you know, I'm really keen to get as many kids back in school as possible. And the key to making that happen is to keep this stability with our cases. So I'll have to make a decision in a couple weeks around if we go forward another phase or not. But if I had to decide today, I would stay right where we are.
Speaking of schools, your 2 children, are you planning to send them back for in-person learning?
Yes.
What goes into that decision? Why have you made that decision?
Because they need it. First of all, this is very personal. So what I do with my children is not what I'm telling other people to do. My kids need to be in school. They like it. They miss it. They're getting really behind by not being in school. They learn better in school. And if you really, maybe I've spent too much time with the science and the data and the risks, but if you really dig into the risks to children, in my own personal assessment for my children, the educational, emotional, intellectual harm that would be done to them by staying out of school is much greater risk than the possibility that they would get COVID. And if they get COVID, they're both, thank God, young, healthy kids, so I'm not overly worried about, that. So that's how I think about it for my children.
The school district, I think Burrill's just moving towards distance learning.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's final, but I'm hearing more and more districts.
I heard that this morning, and I don't know if it's final either, or even public. I think that is terrible. Their cases, I'd have to go get the numbers at my desk. I think they're at 50 or 56 per 100,000 per week. If you
For Burrill, I haven't checked.
Yeah.
I haven't looked at their.
Please give me my phone, please. Anyway, that makes me sad for those kids. The cases in Burrillville are in the 50s per 100,000. That's perfectly safe environment. Dr. Fauci last week said it's sorry, I can't find it fast enough. I got the report this morning. It's in the 50s. Audrey can get the exact number. Like Dr. Fauci, I think, said it well. He said if you're in a green zone, you ought to be able to get the kids back in school. And if Burrillville is at, the 50 per 100,000, that's solidly green zone. And that means you ought to be able to get the kids back in school. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying it's going to be the way it was. I'm not saying it's going to be as good as it was pre-COVID. I'm saying every day we can get a child in the classroom learning is a good day for that kid. So we have to work to maximize the number of kids and the number of days. And for a community that has such a low prevalence, to say all distance learning, I think it's wrong.
I think hearing from districts, Warwick, Providence, especially, are ventilation and extra staff. And your press conference to the state is actively helping districts, and we're going to give you masks and gowns and these supplies. But I didn't hear anything about fixing the ventilation problems or hiring these additional staff that districts are saying they need. Is that help on the way?
Yeah. So a few things, a lot of things in that question. I have earmarked, or not earmarked, we have started to send to districts an additional $50 million from our CARES Act funding to help them with reopening. So that's $50 million that they can use to do exactly what you're talking about. You know, buy air filtration systems, which I believe Providence has done, hire extra people. I'm hopeful that we will be able to do more. I'm still in limbo, waiting to see what happens with the federal government, but that's an additional 50, which you know, $50 million. It's not all they need, but it is $50 million. We're getting it into their hands, and they can use it for what you said. The other thing is, you don't need, I was talking to Dr. Chan yesterday, who's at the health department, about this ventilation, and he said the best thing is to open the windows. So you don't need expensive ventilation necessarily. You need airflow. A box fan in a window might do the trick. Letting the kids go outside is by far the gold standard. Now, a lot of these buildings are old. I get that. This is going to be hard. Some of the retrofits will absolutely be expensive. But that there's some money available for that. And yes, we're going to continue to help. I know the National Guard is already in touch with every single school district, offering to help wherever possible with buildings.
Higher education, UNC, I think, has already pulled the plug on InPerson Learning. That was kind of a disaster. I think Michigan State and Notre Dame have also slowed down.
Yeah.
How worried are you that URI, or not to mention Brown, Roger Williams, Bryant, are going to face the same fate, that it's just not going to be doable to have a bunch of college kids in one setting?
Well, let me say this. I'm worried. I am worried. I hope that we learn from their mistakes. You know, URI has a Greek system, fraternities. They better keep that under control. And I've said that to them. And they've given us assurances that they can. But read yesterday's paper, you see fraternities and sororities are a vector of the virus, not surprisingly. We have I had a call this morning, our enforcement call. We have a list of the 25 bars most frequented in Rhode Island by college students, and we are going to be out in force, and we won't hesitate for a half a second to shut down bars and restaurants that allow college kids to congregate. We have also told, we've been on numerous phone calls in the past week and a half, some that I've attended, some the staff has, with college presidents, being crystal clear with them. We are holding them accountable for the behavior of their students on and off campus. So the colleges are saying if the students misbehave off campus, they're going to be suspended. Or it's different in every school. You know, RISD's denying access to studios. So am I worried? Yes, I'd be crazy not to be. College kids do what college kids do. That is congregating, and that is a problem. Whether they have to pull back and go to distance learning, I hope not, but that you know, most of them are private universities. If they have to make that call, then that's what they'll do. I will say this. Months ago, we went to all the colleges and universities and asked them to submit to us their plans. They're awesome. These colleges and universities, to a institution, every one of them, have really, they have thoughtful plans in place. I mean, RISD, I think, spent $10 million just outfitting the campus. Roger Williams has an unbelievable plan, like testing everybody every week type of a thing, or every other week. So, yeah, I'm worried, but I think they've done a great job.
And on nursing homes, as you mentioned, the Association for For-Profit Nursing Homes has pointed to, early on in the pandemic, a lack of testing folks being discharged from the hospital into nursing homes without being tested, and that was the focus, they say, of a lot of the early infections and a lot of the problems that ended up in nursing homes. Do you agree with that, or are they right to say that?
I'd say yes and no. In the very beginning, I mean, early, mid-March, we did have a few instances of exactly what you said. Patients being, positive patients being discharged from hospital to nursing homes, different nursing homes. To say that contributed significantly to the problem over the course of the past 6 months is not accurate. To say that it contributed to the problem in the early weeks, yes, it's true. It took us a while to learn.
What was the recommendation from health to hospitals about whether they should transfer those patients?
Well, see, interesting. In the very, very beginning, which Brian's talking about, I don't think the problem began before we even had the recommendation. They were just doing their normal business. Someone goes to a hospital for rehab, they get discharged back to their nursing home. And that happened in the first few weeks of the crisis before we even could make the recommendation.
But we knew what was happening in Washington. Why didn't we act sooner to shut this sort of thing down?
We did act pretty soon, but a few got away from us early. It happened quickly. We didn't have our footing yet. We didn't have the systems we have now. But again, I would say it was within weeks that we got that piece of the puzzle under control. And if you look at our nursing homes, I feel good about where we are relative to other states. I feel terrible about where we are because far too many people died, or many people died. But if you look at our veterans home, it's pretty amazing the results we've had there compared to, say, Massachusetts and other states. The 1% test positive rate now in nursing homes, pretty great. I mean, relatively. So we were slow in the beginning, but we very quickly recovered and then created COVID-only homes and clustered the COVID patients together. It's really hard. One of my eye-opener, my learnings, I have thought for years that Rhode Island's healthcare system is overly reliant on institutional settings such as nursing homes, which are the most expensive settings. That I think is true if you just look at the numbers. But this crisis has made it crystal clear how hard it is to do infection control in nursing homes. We have a lot of nursing homes that are very old buildings, shared bathrooms, no private bathroom, it's practically impossible to do effective infection control. So we learned that lesson the hard way. Places like Minnesota, who are so much less reliant on nursing homes, just had a lot better experience.
Was there a disagreement among the public health experts on that? Because the nursing homes and limiting the visitation was one of the first things that the state did, and in all of the very, very early communications that went out, even back March, even at the very end of February, I think, nursing homes were highlighted. Was there confusion about what the right path was on transfers between hospitals?
No, that's what I was saying to Brian. This was that we nipped this in the bud quickly. So to say that it's been a big part of the reason of all the illness in nursing homes is not accurate. It's just not. But in those first couple of weeks, there were some discharges to multiple homes. They just were.
We have one quick question.
We're going to change gears to law enforcement.
Yeah.
And so just one last thing, we'll go on.
Sorry.
We've had both in Providence and across the country since June and the protests, there's been an increase in...
Can you wait a minute? Did they know that I'm still in this?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Go ahead.
In murders specifically. With that being the case, do you think right now that Rhode Island needs more police on the street or fewer police on the street?
Excellent question. That, I'm not sure that more police on the street would solve the problems that you bring up. I think the reality is that this COVID crisis has had a lot of unintended consequences, but ramifications. You know, domestic violence is through the roof. Suicide attempts are higher. Mental illness, addiction, crime. So I think it has more to do with, you know, racial unrest. It has more to do, I think, with where we are in dealing with an economic crisis. I mean, it's double-digit unemployment. Crime goes up. So I think when you're dealing with a public health crisis, an economic crisis, a racial unrest and race and crisis, crime increases, as does many other things. I think that, so I don't think you could say, as I now ponder more, I don't think the answer is more police on the streets. I think part of the answer is dealing with these underlying issues, getting more people back to work, addressing mental illness, more effective policing.
But not fewer, it sounds, you're not also saying fewer.
Yeah, that's true. I wouldn't say that. I do agree with and I hear the concern that in certain instances the police have become too militarized and the expenditures on military style equipment might be better spent on other forms of community policing or training. But at least in Rhode Island, no, I would not support fewer police.
And you come to, since those big protests, and I remember you were out in front of this building, and it was a very intense moment. Have you come to any conclusions about what should change here in Rhode Island, about how policing is done, or any policies that will change things?
So I think this is a broad topic. First of all, I think there's no one solution. You know, like people say to me, are you in favor of body cameras? Yes, I am. But that's not a silver bullet. We need a package of reform, which includes training on use of force, training around unconscious bias, training around de-escalation, leadership that imposes and changes a culture and has a zero tolerance for a culture that abides racism. We are going to look at what is referred to as the Police Officers' Bill of Rights. I think it's time for reform there. I also think we need to take a hard look at police officers in schools. I'm not sure whether that is the best approach. And what I do know for sure is that we need more counselors and mental health professionals in schools. And if the way to find the funds for the counselors and mental health professionals is to reduce the police presence in schools, I'd be in favor of that. So anyway, there's a lot in your question, but that's how I think about it. I also know that when you're talking about systemic racism, the tendency is to focus on criminal justice system with good reason, but we have to focus equally on disparities in housing, education, jobs, job training, and healthcare. And so I just want to make sure that in this moment, when racial equity is on everyone's mind, or should be on everyone's mind, we don't just limit that discussion to criminal justice.
Guys, I'm sorry, we're way over
we are
time.
way over, but I like you.
There's a study of Central Connecticut State University, year after year, has found significant racial disparities in traffic stops, including among the state police. It just came out with its third annual report, but the law that you signed expired, and so they no longer have to collect the data.
We should renew the law. I think we should renew the law. I think we should look seriously at the data, and we need to do better. That's what I think. Okay, bye.
Appreciate it.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Governor.
Thank you.
Goodbye, goodbye, goodbye.